Can Bitcoin do it? Can Bitcoin reclaim the 6,600 level as a support? Because we've been seeing downside wicking over the past few weeks, even on this occasion, even last week as well. But now we actually are forming a full-bodied candle below 6,600. Can Bitcoin do it and reclaim it? Let's talk about this in a lot more detail. Subscribe to the channel for more videos like this in the future. Like this video if you enjoy content like this going forward, and let's dive right into it. So back here in January of 2023, we saw the deepest retrace in a cycle at the time, 23%, and then a year later it took a year to actually eclipse that retrace to break the record and form the deepest retrace in a cycle of 23.8. And right now we're actually breaking that record once again, only 2.5 months later, and we're seeing the deepest retrace in a cycle right now at 25%. 25.6%. So that's the deepest retrace in the cycle. And it's interesting how before it took a year to break that record, now it took only 2.5 months. And it's now the deepest retrace. The average retrace is 22%. And over the cycle, we've seen 20%, 22, 22, 22, 23.7, and now 25, the deepest one. So this is definitely an above average retrace. In terms of time, the average duration for a retrace is 42 days or so. This is now a 46-day retrace. So right now, we're also above average territory for duration, but also retrace depth. Definitely so, because historically, we've seen short retrace of only 3 weeks. We've seen the longest retrace be 63 days, 49 and 14 days. This is now becoming slowly one of the longest retraces in the cycle. We already have this as the deepest retrace, but this could also become one of the longest ones in a few weeks' time. So above average in terms of duration, above average in terms of retracement depth. And when it comes to the quarterly candle, this being a point of major resistance, rejection as well, 2 quarters ago in Q1, we actually managed to break beyond this old resistance. Last quarter, Q2, we were able to successfully retest this as support despite some downside volatility. And this quarter, we've only just begun it and we're already seeing slinking below. However, this may be a volatile retest by the end of the quarter, by the end of Q3. This could be a volatile retest where price is trying to slow down in the sell side momentum against this support of 58,800 and then curl up before the quarter is done. So this could be a volatile retest here. Because this is a 3-month period, we could still see downside volatility, upside volatility, but ultimately it's all about closing at the end of the quarter above 58,800, and that would make for a successful retest and position price for a reversal towards the upside. This quarterly candle here is hammering out a base at a previous resistance area, and we managed to do that successfully this past quarter, but now we're still trying to hammer that base out. We're grabbing liquidity at lower prices, so we need buyers to get attracted into the market, to buy into the market, to attract that buy side pressure at lower price levels to initiate a reversal back above 58,800. So that's really important. But before then, we have a few key weekly closes to see here, because we've been seeing so many reaccumulation ranges develop over time across this entire cycle, and every one of those ranges has seen downside wicking below the range low just to tap into that liquidity below there, but ultimately we'd always manage to weekly close above the range low. These orange circles essentially showcase downside wicking, and then ultimately weekly closes above the range low support for each of these reaccumulation ranges. And we saw this sort of dipping below the range low on many occasions already. This is the third occasion. So this week we're seeing dipping below the range low. Last week we saw wicking, and even just after the halving we saw downside wicking as well. So really important for price to monthly or at least weekly close above 6600 before the weekly candle closes. So by the end of the week we need to see Bitcoin weekly candle close above 6600 to protect this range essentially. But what if we don't get that weekly close and we weekly close just like this? Then price still could relief rally back into 6600, but it would be really important for price not to turn this into a resistance, because that would mean that we've confirmed a loss of this old support and confirming it as a new resistance. And if Bitcoin isn't able to do that, then at least we need to recover back here in the next week or two and produce perhaps a weekly close above here to then reclaim this as support and then rally higher to reclaim this overall range, because history is suggesting that this range should continue, because historically we tend to form a post-halving range like we've seen in 2020. We've seen this also in 2016, and we're seeing this also now, but not without a bit of drama. This is a roller coaster ride right now where we're seeing downside wicking below the key support. So really important for 6600 to be reclaimed as support to continue seeing this historical tendency play out, because historical price tendencies assume that price will continue to consolidate within this reaccumulation range while producing downside wicks below the key support, while producing upside wicks above the range high resistance. Because even in previous reaccumulation ranges, we've also seen price produce upside wicks below the range high. We've seen that on many occasions. This is simply a fact, and it just tends to happen across ranges. We tend to see extreme fear, maximum pessimism, extreme uncertainty, doubt. Whereas on the flip side of that, we tend to see extreme greed, euphoria, over optimism, overconfidence in the market. So these are two extremes in terms of psychology. And when it comes to losing support, we're definitely seeing that fear crawl back into the market. So we know what needs to happen. 6600 needs to get reclaimed as a support. And so if we think of it as a range here, because this is the same range that I'm talking about, 6600 to 71,400 roughly speaking, we've seen clustering in price action on the daily time frame around the range low of 6600. We've seen upside, downside, upside volatility here, and now we're seeing a lot of the same. However, we've seen even more extra volatility towards the downside. But if we're able to manage to reclaim this 56,800 level, so essentially the support right over here, the previous downside wicking bottom here, then we'll be able to get back on track in terms of fully and further developing this cluster of price action around the range low. So at the moment we are overextending quite considerably, but before the week is over we could still see price revisit 6600. And in fact, it really needs to move towards the upside to reclaim this level before the week is done, because this could still be downside volatility in the same way that we saw downside volatility here. But of course, this is more of an extreme example. So there's a lot of ground to cover, but in the very, very short term, we need to reclaim perhaps 56,800. And then before the week is over, we need to reclaim 6,600. And if we're not able to do that, then maybe next week, 6,600, maybe in the next 2 weeks, for example. Really important to reclaim this level to get back on track to continue formulating this cluster of price action here around the range low, because this sort of clustering in price action would precede another cluster, but this time in the upper half of the range. So essentially producing a cluster just like this one. So a deviation below the range low here, in the same way we've seen deviations beyond the range high, these deviations tend to simply attract FOMO buyers, and here we tend to offload panic sellers. So really important for price to recover back into the range, leave the panic sellers and the people who are capitulating behind out of extreme fear Price needs to reclaim the 6,600 level over the coming days. Can it do it? That's something that Bitcoin needs to do to preserve this reaccumulation range and continue the historical tendency that we tend to see after the halving, which is consolidation. We are 77 days after the halving, roughly speaking, and history is suggesting that we should be consolidating for the same amount, an additional 70 days, over 70 days, in fact, because historically we tend to see a breakout in Bitcoin's price action from a reaccumulation range like this 150 days after the halving. So history is suggesting additional consolidation should occur, but at the moment we're seeing price really tease history with a potential breakdown. But let's see if it's a fake breakdown. Let's see if it's a confirmed one. 66,600, or at least 6,600 is the level to watch out for. That being said, thanks so much for watching. Check out the top right hand corner video for more. Subscribe to the channel for more videos like this in the future. Like this video if you enjoy content like this going forward, and I'll speak to you in the next one. Speak to you soon.